leave my screen off for now, so it's just us heads talking. Yeah. Hello, hello.
What is up,
everyone.
Flutter devs?
Waiting for that line. That's brilliant.
Yeah. How long did it take you to come up with this line?
About as long as it took me to say, hey, how should I start a video? What is up, Flutter devs? There we go. Done.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for joining in our live stream today. This is the third live stream and the last for today, Europe time. And first of all, welcome US and all America, South and North America. I think you are now awake and can join us here on the live stream. We have planned today, or in this session, a live coding session together with Simon and Matt Carroll. You already know Simon, self-proclaimed head of the Flutter community. And we have here a special guest, Matt Carroll, ex-Fluttery YouTuber, and now he's here with his new his new YouTube channel, Super Declarative. And you can also find him on Twitter with the same handle, Super without an E.
Yep, Twitter was like, we're not giving you that last character. And I said, fine.
We had the same problem with the Flutter community. It's too long.
Yep, it happens.
So, yeah. Matt, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. Well, you already hit the high points, but I am a former member of the Flutter team at Google. Before that, I was an Android developer. I worked for a few years at Nest before joining the Flutter team. And so now I'm working on a Flutter education and training company called Super Declarative, where I'm hoping to help the entire world adopt Flutter for reasons that I'm sure all of you are familiar with after hacking with it this weekend.
Absolutely. If you have any questions, please ask them in the chat. We collected a bunch of questions in the earlier streams and everything you wrote on Twitter so far. But if you have precious questions right now while we are hacking here, ask them and we will go through them one by one. So what are we going to build today, Simon?
We had some ideas about how we might do something retro, and some of the topics that came up were just how the old screens would display fonts and graphics, and how we may make sort of mobile UIs that could look like that, something around that line. And then we came up with this sort of concept of, how would you make graphics look like they're running like an old screen or something like that. So we're going to give some sort of pixel effects a go, and also happy to try out anything that any one of the live participants wants us to do. We'll see what we can.
Or I come up with an idea.
Yeah, exactly. Then we'll give it a go and see where we go from there.
Cool.
Let's do it.
We're flexible.
Then share your screen and oh, there's an arrow.
Oh yeah. See, that's what I get for just deleting a bunch of code. So let's just start off with I literally just ripped out all some example code here so we can retype it back in and start fresh, and we'll start from here. So obviously we need a run app, and we want a stateless widget where we'll call it my app, the usual. Zero app, and we'll import. If anyone has any problems reading it, we'll see if we can increase the font size. Just let the live stream know. Right. So hopefully,
I was checking it, and maybe you could increase it a little bit.
Yep. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, so now we have a piece of material, a material app, and I actually made the main function a future void async because we're going to cheat here, just load some assets up front so we don't have to do any future build or any of this other stuff. So actually, why don't we start there? So you all know, well, you probably know. So what I've done, we're going to start off with this parrot image, which is quite a well-known test image. lots of colors so we can just see how things change. Tools. And what we're going to do is we need to load that image. So if I was just to simply do, I've added it to the pub spec over here. I've added, if you didn't know, that you can add an entire folder just by ending with the slash. That adds all the contents of that, not nested folders, mind you. What we're going to do here is load that. So Matt, how would I? So I can just like, I should be able to do like this, right? That should just load the image. Gives us a start.
Yep. Yep. Flutter knows how to pull in an asset like that. Real simple.
There we go. So there we go.
Just the path to the asset. Yep.
Okay, so simple enough, easy, no problems.
Done. That's actually it.
We're done. That's it. All the live coding.
We'll see you next time.
Yeah, right. So here's the question, right? How do we manipulate the pixels of this image, right? Because we want to. I specifically this little challenge we're going to do first of all is, if you hadn't noticed by the name Game Boy, we're going to try and make this the Game Boy colors. And if you guys, let's see if I can find reference here. Whoops. So the old school Game Boy had screens that looked like this kind of sort of it was actually a 4-color or 2-bit graphics. So we only had 4 shades of color total, and they're all shades of gray. But what happened was the backing screen on the Game Boy was actually a piece of green cardboard with the reflective surface for the LCD. So it gave it that kind of green hue. I'm talking about original black and white. Yeah, the early days.
Classic.
So, yeah, classic, right? So, how do we get access to the pixels?
So let me ask you a directional question here. So, looking at image.asset, we know that internally that uses an image provider. Are you thinking that you want to come in maybe with a custom image provider, or are you thinking you might want to get to a raw image, maybe work at the UI image level instead?
Yeah, I think the UI image level, because it means that we can just work with it easily. But then, if we wanted to use this throughout the application, we could then take that code, put it into an image provider, and then that would allow us to wrap any image or any asset as this sort of effect, which would be great to try. Images. So to load some images from the background. So I could trace this down, and we can go into asset, image provider, dig down and see how it's doing it. And that's the great thing about Flutter being open source. However, here's something I prepared earlier. I'm gonna drop this in there, and I'll walk everyone through this. So what we've got here is we supply it with the same asset path that we'd have down here on the image. And then it's going to create a completer. So a completer is an asynchronous operation that completes at a later date. And the key here is root bundle. So if you notice, I import that from services. Root bundle is your bundle that ships with your app, which is all your assets and anything you put in your pub spec, in fonts and so on.
Now I'm seeing UI.image, and I know you have image.asset down below. What's the relation? What's the difference or similarities between image.asset and UI.image?
So this was actually brought up, I think it was by Miguel in the last stream actually, but the problem here is we get name collision, right? So we have a image class in the as an image class as a widget, and an image class in the UI framework, which is actually the raw image underneath the hood. So they both have the same class name. So we import with a alias, and that allows us to use that as a suffix, in this case UI dot, allowing us to use both image classes in the same file.
Okay, so the image at the bottom is a widget, and the UI.image at the top is almost kind of like a bitmap.
Yeah, in fact, it's a immutable bitmap. So, a page handle to raw decoded image. So basically, in here we have width, height, and then we have 2-byte data, which allows us to go and get that the actual raw image data from the buffer.
Cool.
So that's essentially what we're doing here, right? So what we're actually doing, well, first things first, we're gonna to load the asset, and when we get the data coming back, we then put it through this decode image from list. there's actually a few of these inside the framework. So if I do UI decode, your image from list, image from pixels, and instantiate image codec. Under the hood, they all do the same thing. They all go into the framework. They all do this decode image somewhere under the hood, instantiate image codec. And what this does, this function goes through and works out what the bytes are that you sent it. So is it a PNG? Is it a GIF? Is it a JPEG? And then it decodes it with the proper decoder, and then returns back the actual raw image. It's an interesting point that most people don't realize when building apps. If I've got a 1 meg JPEG file, right, but uncompressed, that's its raw image size. Now, you normally see that in like a status bar in Photoshop or somewhere in your editor. You might see that it says uncompressed size 50 megabytes or 100 megabytes or something. That's literally what it's going to be in your app in memory. So you might be 1 meg in assets when you ship your app, but when it's in memory, it's 80 megabytes of RAM from your device. So yeah, there's a little gotcha there for some of the new people, right? So you need to make sure that it's not just the image file size that matters, it's how many pixels are in your image to how big it's going to be.
Makes sense.
I mean, off the back of the cuff here, right? So 1920 by 1080, that's 2 megapixels or 2 million pixels for a HD image. And then we have 4 bytes for each pixel in memory. So it's alpha, red, green, blue. So times 4, that's 8.2 megabytes for 1 frame of HD video. Now you have a cameras now that are like what 30 megapixels or something. I don't know. I mean, what ones? 60 megapixels is kind of a sort of a usual one to see, right? There's 16 million in kilobytes or whatever it is, and then times that by what did I say? 4. So yeah, 67 megabytes for for 16 megapixel image. So yeah, it adds up very quickly, and you can't exactly you can't expect the app to be able to process that data and move it around the screen and zoom in and scan, do the scaling and for it to be performant at that point, right? You need image processing, big topic. Anyway. So we're going to decode the image and we're going to supply the buffer. So data comes back as a byte buffer. I think it's a byte data. I forget the type, byte data. And that has a buffer inside it. Now this is basically a holder for the raw image data, so that we can essentially point to it and not. Basically as a reference to this raw buffer, and then it allows us to manipulate the raw buffer in different ways. In this case, we treat the raw buffer as a uint8 list. That's an unsigned int 8 bits. So each byte it is treated as 8 bits each, right? But you can even load it as each 4 bytes in the file is 32 bits. Therefore, each one is an integer. There's lots of ways of manipulating this data. In this case, we're going to then complete our completer with that image. The idea about this is this requires the decode image from this requires a callback, and then that's going to complete asynchronously. So we need to wait for a future to complete with the value from that callback. So we can just do a simple future function, right? And
so the reason we had to do that was because it didn't return a future. It simply said you have to give me a callback. You have no choice.
Yeah. There's no option, which seems a bit ridiculous when you actually look at the code, because I think the code for the function wraps it anyway. So it could have just done return as well, right? If you don't specify callback, return it, and then just do a future UI image. There's a PR from someone right there.
Yeah, there you go. First commit. Let's answer this question here. What are as, show, and hide keywords doing in the import section?
So that's a good point. So here, if I was to, if I take out this import and I import root bundle, what I've just included is all of the Flutter services, right? So this is everything inside the service area of Flutter, which is quite a lot. And my code does not rely on any of this, right? So it speeds up the compilation process if it doesn't need to include anything it doesn't use, right, in your code. you're explicitly telling it, no, I don't want to use these things. So I don't want to use font loader, keyboard maps, or any of this stuff. So just by me specifying show root bundle, it means I'm only importing that one symbol from that file, or one variable, whatever it might be. Same goes for hide. Hide's the inverse, right? So I can say hide root bundle, which means I want everything but the root bundle. And then the as is just aliasing that import. So basically everything from that file is accessed through the prefix that we were talking about before, so UI dot.
The root problem there is that in Dart there is no implicit namespacing. So you import a file and you get everything that's in that file, and all of the constant things, all of the things that are declared at the top level of the file, those are just direct references that you have in your code. It's very easy to get name conflicts then, which is the problem that we had here with image, the raw image, and image, the widget. They both have the same name. They're both at the top level. So what Simon did is he said, import Dart UI and give it the namespace UI, call it UI. And so then he's able to say UI.image, that refers to the raw image, and then the regular image, the widget image, comes from, in this case, out of the material.dart import. So it's the namespacing issue is the primary issue that we run into here. And then also with what Simon did where he said, show the root bundle, you may need, again, one thing out of a package, but maybe you actually don't want to import, like you don't even want to allow other developers to come in and accidentally use other parts of that package. So you explicitly say, no, I want this one thing, and if we ever want anything else, we need to consciously import it. That can be a way to control your dependencies.
A good example of that is that name collision, right? So just by showing, it means we don't get a name collision on something that might have been a name collision inside as well.
And Pascal would like to know if it speeds up tree shaking.
Sorry, do you know what? I have not done any performance testing, but from my knowledge of compilation process and everything else, if it doesn't have to process as many symbols, it doesn't have to hold that much in memory, it should be faster. But I haven't seen any numbers. So let's load this image. Image equals await. So the key thing here is just a point to mention is by making my main function asynchronous, it lets me do operations like communicate with the server, check if the user's logged in, other things like that before I show the widget tree. And what's going to happen is it will use in this case it's Android or iOS, it will use the splash screen that's shipped as part of your Android or iOS project files. So you get the system splash screen, and then when it's ready, your UI shows. So this stops that problem of not knowing what screen to show the user, like if they're showing the logged in state or the logged out state. It's a simple solution to that. By no means the only solution, but I like it. It's direct. It's quite direct. So direct.
And if you're looking up that concept on Android, I believe it's referred to as the launch screen in the Android SDK.
I wonder who did the code for this Android embedded stuff on Flutter. I don't know.
Yeah, where could we find that person who spent so much time working with the Android parts of Flutter?
If anyone didn't know, that was Matt. So,
well, I always qualify it. If you use it and it doesn't work, I didn't do it.
Okay, so I'm just using the hotkeys here to just really quickly create a constructor here that's going to take our image into our stateless widget for the application. So now I put this in. This is a raw UI image. What's quite nice about this, in having one of these raw UI images, is that you can paint it straight to a canvas. You can manipulate in lots of different ways, and people I'm not sure of this one, but you can actually do raw image and pass it the image.
And raw image is a widget here, even though we use the term raw image to refer to UI.image. In this case, raw image is a widget. And
as it says here, display UI image directly. And you can get some of the normal image effects that you would normally get on the image widget. And it basically avoids the whole provider layer of loading images. So if I load that, here we go. First issue. So this is actually an obvious one. Now I look at it, but we're trying to access the root bundle before Flutter is initialized. So it warns us that we need to add a show initialized before we try and do that. So we just stick it at the top of our main function, and yay, it restarted, and we don't see any difference because now it's loading the exact same image but as a UI image, one of its raw images. So what can we do next with this? So I think what we probably want to do is make this stateful. Now we can have our processed UI image. Processed. No, do you know what? Done. There you go. That's easier. And then we'll have a method that will do the processing. Process. And we'll have it set the done to wherever the result is. I haven't made the result yet, but this is the kind of principle, right? And then down here, because we did set state, we'll rebuild everything, and we'll make we'll switch the raw image out. So we'll say if we have one for done, and we'll use done, or we'll use our input image. So we start off with this colored one, and then we'll get the process one afterwards. And we need a result.
And do you want to toss an async on that guy, or are you going to return a promise?
That is
the future.
Yeah. No, we'll just.
I've been doing too much JavaScript recently. I'm talking about promises over
I
here.
know, right? I know TypeScript and all that loveliness, right? So I think what we'll do as well is wrap this raw image. Yeah, let's just wrap this in a column and add a raised button. Now, it's what's nice thing about Flutter is you can do all this UI really quickly as prototyping, just to have stuff work while you're developing, and then just delete the UI once you know you've got something working. So, in this case, we can say make a button, and then this can be like it's just a raised button. It looks horrible, and then later on we can make it a nice little loading button and do other things, right? Just hand the method straight over. Click on it. Process. Right. And then we'll need to have this expanded. That's one thing I'm missing, I think. That's another. There you go. There's another fix. Expanded. That needs. Why is that not in the suggestions? I'm literally always doing that, and
I'm still trying to get builders in there. Like you have a stream builder in there, but
I know, right?
All the other builders.
Sorry, I was thinking like you do layout builder or wrap with layout builder and
yeah. I've literally filed an issue for that. So if anybody else wants that, go thumbs up that issue.
Yeah. So okay, so let's just stick null in there for a second so we get to the compile. Okay, and we have a button. Not really. Let's replace that with. So this is something I actually do. So center is an align. Is inside you'll see a center is just an align with alignment center. I want to add padding. Now I'm going to add two properties. So if I add padding, this works, right? And I've got padding around my process button. However, what's kind of nice about this is if you make it a container, you can then have both properties on there. And we don't go mess one level deep. And this does exactly the same thing. If you look in container, at its, I think it's build method. Yeah. So you'll see here that it has, if you specify constraints, it does limited box. If you specify alignment, in this case a center, it wraps in a line, and then so on and so forth. And one of these will be if you specify padding. I've probably missed there is. It'll add the padding to it. So what's quite nice about that is kind of just tidies things up. But the problem here is people overuse container for just the one thing, right? So if I want to add padding or alignment, I don't just do a container because it's just not descriptive enough. Also, it can't be made constant. So a container doesn't have a constant constructor, so you don't get compile time optimizations on that part of the widget tree. Anyway, digressions, right? Okay, so now we've got that. Let's make our button do something. Let's get the data from our image. So widget.image.buffer, I think 2 byte data. And that's going to give us one of those byte datas back. Then I will probably end up using the width quite a lot. So these are just shorthands, aliasing, local aliases. Performance-wise, it probably doesn't make that much of a hit to access it this way.
Also, regardless of what Simon is doing here, don't ever use 1-letter variable names. This is your public service announcement. Don't do it.
Don't do what I'm doing. Yeah, the caveat is it's just example code. Oh look, I just forgot that this is the future. So now we've got an option here. We can like load the raw data that we get back for the image as any one of these things. So 8-bit, 32-bit, 16-bit, and so on, floats, all sorts. The data specifically is when we fetch it back. I'll show you in here. It says image byte format by default is raw RGBA. That means it's 32 bits, 8 bits for red, 8 bits for green, 8 bits for blue, 8 bits for alpha, all in a line, right? So there's 1 byte for red, 1 byte for green, 1 byte for blue, 1 byte for alpha. Now, if we load it into memory, we can load those 4 bytes from the raw data as an integer in memory, which is a lot quicker to work with. 32 bits will just be is a single operation for the CPU to do. 64-bit CPUs and so on. It's just still one operation to manipulate that data rather than separate adds for red, green, blue, and alpha, which is 4 times slower in essence, right? So in our case, this will be quicker to load.
Is this an argument for bit shifting that you're getting to?
Yeah. So I think
logical operations.
So we want to treat the pixel as a unit, right? And even though we want to manipulate the red, green, blue, alpha, if we need to load and store them as red, green, blue, alpha, it probably is slower. But we can also get to take advantage of things like the color class, and it does the bit shifting for us and things like that. So this is basically, if you ever have a color, so like color.white, value, colors, sorry. Maybe choose a different one. What's your favorite color, Matt? Yellow?
Do it. Yellow, the super declarative color.
Right. So if I go yellow, right, we'll do the primary yellow. Well, this one, basically one of these, right? That's the same thing you see there. So that's actually alpha, and then red, green, and blue. And what's key about this is that value is hidden away inside the color, and it's just an integer, and there explains the bits for the red, green, blue, and alpha channel. So we want to get those bits out. So we can actually take advantage of these getters in here, which do a bit of processing for us, or we can just do it manually. In fact, we'll do it with a color class. It's slightly a bit more slow because we're allocating a color object for every pixel that we manipulate. So it's great for demonstration purposes. When you're doing this kind of, just imagine if we're doing this on a full HD image, then we've got to do 2 million operations to change every pixel on the image. So if your machine is 2 megahertz, you've just eat up all of the processing power of your machine, in essence, just processing the one image for 1 second, right? So if you think about like just fractional units there, like 2 million out of your gigahertz, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it does add up. And if you just hit a button, it takes 3 seconds to process an image. Well, you're not going to ever do that real time, right? So anyway, so we'll load a color from each pixel. So we'll need to process each pixel. So we'll do it. The actual data is stored X, then Y. So we do the Y on the outside and then the X on the inside of the loop. So if we say is less than height Y plus plus, that's going to loop over each row. And then X over the width. I think X and Y are sometimes those ones that is the name of the variable, right? I mean, it's a single letter variable. I'm not sure I could give that a better.
Okay, sometimes it's acceptable. Generally terrible. Sometimes it's acceptable.
Okay, so now we need to load from the pixels the value. So the pixels is just an array, and the array is stored as scan lines. So it goes top left across the image, and then next line and across the image, next line and across the image. So to simply address that, we just say the y, which is the row that we're on, multiplied by the width, right? That tells us like the start in the image, in the buffer, plus the x. It sounds a bit complicated, but honestly, it's that simple. And we'll store that as index so we can refer to it again. So now we have a color for our pixel. We want to take out the red, green, and blue. There is actually, interesting enough, we could do manipulations with this. Compute luminance, for instance, which we're actually going to do. So this should give me, this is essentially the grayscale value, right? It's just the brightness. So if I was to store this, we'd get grayscale image. In fact, that's a good start, right? So if we now say pixels index equals color limits value. So what's it return back? Oh, it's a double, right? So that's a good question. We need, I'm doing this very hastily. So I'm basically taking the value of 0 to 1 from the double and converting to 0 to 255 for one part of the red, green, blue, and then we'll just say color from ARGB, alpha, all, and then I'll just repeat that for the red, green, blue, giving us a grayscale. So this essentially could be gray, right? So, there's your better naming, Matt.
Thank you.
It needs to be an integer as well.
So what this is doing is gray is essentially a percentage. And what he's doing is saying if it's 30%, we want 30% red, 30% green, 30% blue.
Yep. So
now, why don't we go ahead and show that on the screen so we can start getting some visual feedback for the audience?
I think that's a good example. I think that's definitely what we want to do. So we need to take that pixel data and put it back into a UI image for the screen. So one thing we don't have yet in Flutter is a mutable pixel buffer. So that's a pixel buffer we can just edit the pixels from when we see it on the screen. We have to convert the pixels back into an image that can then be displayed by the framework. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to do something very similar to what we did earlier. So it's a completer for a UI image. This is, again, done asynchronously with a callback. I'm going to, I'll decode image. Why me? UI. Decode image from pixels. So we give it our pixels. He wants the width, the height, pixel format. RGBA, that's what we got it as. And then callback, we'll get the image. It's all going wrong. There we go. And then we'll set that on the completer. Okay, so pixels. Now we've got that as a integer because it's easier for us to work with, but decode image from pixels requires a different type of buffer. So this is the trick, and this is something I wanted to explain actually. So if I do this, let's get an comma in there and break it out a little bit better. There we go. So what this is doing is it's passing the original buffer over. Now remember, this pixels that we've got back here is just a representation as. So when we edit these pixels, we're still editing that original buffer. So when we pass it across, it's going to take the new changes that we've given it. So, and then we want to say final processed equals await. Okay. back. Right. So should we see what happens? Maybe slide. Press the button. Hey.
Woo!
There's our grayscale image. Okay. So we're getting there. We're getting there. Okay. Can we make this look like Game Boy though? That's the question. So what we're doing here is we're taking each input image, each input pixel, and making it grayscale. And we want something similar. We want to take the grayscale value and split it into a palette. So let's pull in, here's something I made earlier. This is the Game Boy palette.
Now, can you describe what you mean by a palette, or and why a palette is relevant for the Game Boy situation?
Okay, so it's called index colors. It's a way of saving memory back in the old days, right? I won't go too much into it, but basically you couldn't store red, green, blue, and for every pixel that you see on the screen because it would take up too much memory. That's like 32, let's say 4 bytes. And I only had 1 kilobyte of RAM. I mean, there's no way I could store the picture on the screen with that. So what they would do is you would store the index, and there's less bits needed to store an index into a palette. So here we got 4. So the first index, if it's 2 bits, the first index is going to be 0, 0. The next one's 0, 1. This is in binary, yeah? So normally prefix would be. Then this would be 1, 0.
So let me see if I understand what you're describing here. So what you're saying is that we want to support 4 colors, and instead of defining each color in the image by the full RGB, we're just going to say at this pixel, we want color 1 or we want color 3, and your palette says color 1 is actually this color, color 3 is actually this color.
So that's literally how the original hardware would work, right? The original Game Boy would say, oh, what have I got? What value am I getting from this index? And then go look it up in the palette and display the color on the screen, because it was easier to less memory intensive and so on. However, for our case, we're going to need to simulate it. So we need to take our original RGB value, convert it to a luminance that we're doing right now, and then we want to work out what luminance that fits into, what scale from the 4. And we take the RGB value from this color and put it back into our RGB values that we're going to put out. So it's simulating the index lookup process that would happen in the original. So if I take this value here, this is a value of 0.0 to 1.0, right? So we actually want to take that and split it into, we want a value of 0 to 3 come out of this. So we should just be able to say multiply, well, actually we'll take color length minus 1, multiply by that. This would be index, we'll call it.
Might want to call that palette if that's what you mean, since we're dealing with colors as well. I mean the underscore color.
Oh yeah. That's good. Cool. Is that? I suppose this is the palette index that one look up into. Okay, so
now I'm curious. I'm curious with luminance being kind of the relative amount of white light in that pixel. Why does the size or the magnitude of the luminance determine the index in the palette that you're looking up?
The thing is, there's a limited amount of what we can get back. So we're going with downsampling, right? So we need to choose something that we want to downsample from. We could just choose the red channel, the green channel, the blue channel. However, the original was based off of a grayscale. So by choosing the luminance, we're essentially choosing pretty much that's the original grayscale. However, we can tweak this in a minute and see what effects we can come up with, because there's definitely some pretty cool effects you can do with doing this.
You know, actually, something I should probably have asked before that is, in the palette, since we're just looking at hex numbers, are these all grayscale color values in the palette, or does this palette actually contain true colors?
I see what you mean. Well, this is true color, right? This is us creating a palette of true color.
But are those grayish colors, or what kind of?
Sorry,
here, my brain can't compile the hex.
Oh, so here on the left, can you see that in the?
Okay. So we have shades of green.
Shades of green.
So that makes sense. So
original.
Yeah, so since we're all working within green, taking the luminance essentially allows us to pick how bright the green should be. That's essentially what we're doing here.
Yeah. And then we'll look up that in. We'll look that up and set it. Just do that immediately. So all we're going to do is say palette index. Now that that's going to give us, that is going to give us which one of these it is, and then we're going to get the integer value out of that, which is again the original RGB pixel value. I'll put it back into pixels. So hit the button. Hey, wow. So first problem, it's not very pretty, is it? So what we've done here is we've lost a lot of the image quality, image information, right? So if I change it back, all of those shades that were dark have all gone into 1/4 of the original image color space. So yeah, it worked, but we lost a lot, right? So there's probably we could. The question is, what do we want to do with this, and how do we want to solve it? I think that's. So the original, so originally when you had limited color space, sorry, I'm just trying to think about this. So original color space problems that you'd have on the old devices was dithering, right? So basically where you would use parts of other colors. So in this case, the mid color, if we were to space the mid color out every other pixel, you would get half dark, half mid color, and you'd create another color with your eyes blending the two pixels together. So you kind of create gradients of color by doing dithering. So there is a great article which I've lost for reference. Here, I'll bring this over. So we've got dithering, and I think there's some, there's this sort of pattern of yeah, you can see there. So it looks like there's just two colors. That's red and blue, but you start seeing purple on the one at the bottom, right? Which is an equal mix of red and blue in this case. So by mixing the colors, you can get different shades. That does your eyes in, right? Question is, what is the dithering? So there's definitely different algorithms. There's one being used there. So you can see here it's filled in other pixels to create the illusion of shade, even though this is only, again, I think this is only 4 colors or 3 colors, this image. You create the illusion of lots of different gray scales. So we could try doing the same thing. This is going to be new to me, so start on Wikipedia, I guess, unless we can find a reference. Oh, here we go. Oh, this is an interesting one. So original, halftone. Okay. So halftone is how we were talking about this the other day. This is how magazines print. So they print, they splodge the dots on the page, and you normally get this effect so that they can get less ink being used. I think it is. There's a technique behind it. Anyway, halftone is what you see in print. Not very much in computer screens because they don't work with dots. Ordered, you kind of get those weird patterns. I think the patterns are called Moria patterns. There's a name for them, where you get like aliasing between lines. So we see if ordered dithering. Aha. The algorithm reduces the number of colors that are applied to a threshold map M to the pixels displayed, causing some pixels to change color depending on the distance of the original color. Okay. Not helpful. Hang on. What we do actually have, oh, I'll tell you what we could try looking at. I wonder. That's kind of interesting, right? So there is actually a color filter which you actually apply to images directly. This is limited, so you can apply like a blend, a color, specific color with a blend mode. However, you have got this matrix, transforms the color by 5 by 5 matrix. The fifth row is implicitly added to the identity. Okay, so I know what this is. This is, yeah, the red gets passed through this line, green through that line, blue through that line, alpha through that line, and then you've got the cross product. So probably not going to do what we want. Although this is
are those dithering algorithms even per pixel, or do they require neighboring pixel data?
That's what I'm just thinking about. I mean, this has got to require neighboring pixel data. So I think this is meant to be a 4 by 4 matrix of 4 values. So you're basically taking the 4 values and making one quarter of that, giving you. Hang on. Joe, we could pre-calculate thresholds.
There's a question here that says, what is the use of code if we can do it easily through Photoshop? I would say, how do you think Photoshop does it?
Exactly, right? I suppose there's also the other aspect of this, right, is that you can have live data coming down from the interwebs, right? So you can actually have any image from any place on the interweb and process it inside the app, right? As if Photoshop was processing.
By the way, one day I want to see Photoshop implemented in Flutter. So we better make sure this stuff can be done. Got to get the entire Adobe suite onto Flutter. And then Adobe XD could be built with Flutter and used to create layouts that are then exported as Flutter code. How about that?
Wishing for a lot. I was just thinking about we could set up.
Well, so Pascal wants to run his retro UI at 24 FPS. I'm sure you probably can, but you might have to do a custom build of the Flutter engine for that. I'm not sure. Or you might have to intercept on the platform side when it sends what's called the vsync signal. You may need to intercept that and skip some of them.
I had an idea. Let's just quickly investigate that. Hang on. So UI exports what's called the window, which is how it's this object here, and this is basically Dart's. I wouldn't say Flutter, but Dart's sort of link between the user interface and the platform. So you can see here, metrics change, device pixel ratio, all this lovely good stuff. This is also where it gets notified. You get the draw window change, I think it is. I think there's actually some examples of how you could do that in the repo. So down here, if I think on begin on draw frame, you could potentially set yourself up so you can override this callback, right? Get the current callback, override this callback, and then just set it up so only every 1 in 24 or 1 in whatever it's 1 in 4 goes through, and the other ones are skipped. So it only paint every 4th frame to give you a 24 frame or whatever it is. You can work out the math, but you can actually drop the frames that you don't want. That should be possible. You can give that a go, Pascal.
Now, can you set a window? Because I remember I messed with a window at one point. I think I introduced the ability to use a fake window for testing, but I can't remember if you can set a fake window at during production.
You can't, but you can change it. So in here, I can just say on draw frame equals my own callback, right?
Oh, really?
So my thought, damn, I'm having ideas here. This is bad.
This is about to become a completely different exercise right now. Thanks, Pascal.
Well, I'm just thinking here, if you were to rotate this, right, at a constant rate, we could see if we could do that. That might be fun. Or do we want to carry on with trying to do our dithering?
Well, actually, so maybe Pascal, if you want to mention the timing at this point, I think we're running up about an hour. So
oh wow, really? That went quick.
We probably have enough time to try the animation you want to try. We probably don't have enough time to bring in dithering, would be my guess.
All right. So let's just give this a go. So let's just check.
And do you just want to throw a ticker in there and just straight up base it off the ticker?
Yeah. Do an animated builder. I'm doing this backwards. People at home are like, what is it doing? I can't do it. I need the parameters. I need the types. Right. Angle. So we could say what 360 modulus. So we can actually do something ridiculous like what 360 time. How many turns do we want? Like 10. Let's do 1 revolution right now, right? So that should give us 1 revolution if we put an animation controller in. So let's add animation controller. And then, right. So we need to initialize that controller when we start our state. You want to explain what I'm doing? Right, quickly.
Sure. So the animation controller is essentially a clock. It's going to tell us to be at different values at different times. He's initializing the animation controller, which will then work with the animated builder to take that time and apply the time to a rotation. So over time, we rotate around. And if you want to show, you can actually show reassemble right now too, because you're going to have to do a hot restart like this to get init state to run. But if you also implement reassemble, you can say if the controller is null, then go ahead and initialize it, and you can actually avoid doing a hot restart. So just you always have to dispose of animation controllers, which is what he's doing there. So the init state and dispose, those are always needed, but it looks like Simon will make use of reassemble here as well. Reassemble, by the way, runs every time you do a hot reload, not a hot restart, but a hot reload. So every time Simon saves his code, this reassemble method is going to run.
Okay. And we'll give this a what duration? A long duration. Right, by default, an animation controller bounds from 0 to 1. We could give it different values, and you can give it the angle directly, so we can do 0 to 360. The fractional unit is all about precision at that point, so this is perfectly fine for our use case, 0 to 1, and we'll just multiply it later. Most cases, that's fine. So we'll take our controller now. We want to start it in repeat, and we'll have it reverse. It gets to the end. I think that will go forever. I don't think you can just cancel it.
This thing is going to end up looking like a clock.
Oh my God! What have we done? Okay. All right. I can tell you what's happening here. I'm doing 360 when it should be in radians, right? So we want math.pi.
Yeah, that's a whole lot of radians right there.
Exactly. I need to stop it. Let's just quickly code it in. I think this is quite a common one, right? Math as math, right? Because you don't want those simple math functions. Ooh, hello. Well, there's the first problem I've got. Yeah. There we go. And I'm dropping a few frames because my machine's doing heavy work right now, and we're in debug, but that's okay.
So we already have the 24 FPS automatically, just because you're on the live stream.
I know, right? Let's. Is there a way that we can make that better? We could see if we can get some performance back, right? Hang on. Hey, what'd you know? Oh, no. Damn. All right. Well, but still, you can still feel smooth, right? So I wonder what would happen if we, I wonder if I think ensure initialize sets it up. So if we did UI.window here, we're gonna see what happens. Well, this is the fun. This is the fun bit, right? On draw frame, this is old draw frame. So I guess we call this a trampoline. It's like we're going from sort of intercepting the function call chain and overriding it. Draw frame, yeah. And then we're going to call old draw frame. Does it take a parameter? I think it takes. What callback? What is the problem? Change the positional argument. Oh, it's a named argument. Set on draw frame. Oh, it's not a function. Duh. Okay, so that should continue to work. Fail. Okay, so what's happening here is it's null, right? So it's run app in here. Yeah. So
so maybe just move that below run app.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Just doing it asynchronously.
Does run app return a feature? Can you await it? Or does it always, does it run forever?
I think it's what the bindings are doing. So if you guys don't know, this is going deep. So the framework is based off this one class called widgets Flutter binding, which binds all of the different services that build up your Flutter UI into one class. So you've got widgets, rendering, semantics, painting, and so on. And painting, I think it's painting that sits on the draw frame. Draw frame. Ooh, it's rendering. What we could do, I'm thinking, is we could extend this and override the function. That's another way of doing it. And then don't use run up at all. Let's just see if it's in here. On draw frame. On draw frame. Oh, hello. Handle draw frame is registered with window on draw frame and is called, which invokes a persisted frame callback. Okay, so there's our function, and in theory we should be able to override it because we can. So we might as well give it a go, right? See if we can do it. So let's go back to here. Basically, we want to do exactly what RunApp's doing, which is these 3 lines. We just chuck that in there in its place. I'm going to get rid of that in a minute. Right. And then app is our original app. So we'll take that out there. Now we're doing exactly what the run app line did. Right? But we're doing it from it's marked as protected, but we're going to suppress that. This is not good. Anyway, so now the question is, can we we're doing ensure initialized anyway beforehand. So you know what? Let's just leave it like that for a second. What we want to do, we're gonna I'm literally just gonna throw this in. Class my binding. I don't think anyone's ever I've never done this before. We're just gonna try it though. Extends widgets Flutter binding. Right? And then there should be a handle frame, handle draw frame. Okay. So now we don't super, we just choose when we want to super. And that's that basically doing the same thing as we talked about earlier, but slightly different direction. So yeah, we need a static method. Hey, look. Can we set that single to cancel? You might have just damn.
They locked you out.
They locked me out. They locked me out. There's no way around that one. Oh no, not an Android. If we're doing some web, I could use reflection. No, we're not going to go there. All right. Well, there you are. But the theory holds true. It should be possible. Now, I do want to quickly bring attention to one thing. So, GitHub, for anyone that's interested in this kind of stuff and the low-level rendering, it is there's great examples on the Flutter repository. Actually, I think it's under example levels. If I remember right, layers. That's the one. So these are the layers of the Flutter framework, and one of these is rendering. I will make this larger. Those of you at home, and here there's spinning square. There's a good example. So this does a bit of what we just spoke about. So it creates a box, and in this case, it creates a render transform. But the key thing here is, there you go. It's actually starting up its own binding just for the render binding and rendering it directly. These are ways that you can just use certain bits of the framework to do what you want. Touch input, flexible out. One of these, was it rendering? That was rendering. Raw. I think it might be this one. Let me just skip down to main. Yeah, so here you go. Here's a good example of what we're just talking about. So void main, UI window begin frame, schedule a frame, and then this overrides the begin frame with taking it to render a scene. And this literally uses the underlying framework that the widgets use to render themselves to the graphics pipeline. So all of this is all accessible to you, and there's examples on this in the layers section of the examples, and we'll put a link to this in the description after the video. Sorry, hang on, still find more information there.
No, that's definitely good stuff to know. If you understand the lower level rendering stuff, then you're in good shape.
How are we doing on time? Have we got more questions?
Oh, Pascal, do you want to jump in with any time checks?
We can't hear you.
Yes, I'm muting myself now. Great so far. Quick question. I was assuming that you can just create a custom ticker provider and change the tick. Isn't that something which could work? I never did it myself.
That wouldn't change. So for your animation, yeah. So in this situation that we're doing right now, the rotation, we could do that for sure, right? We could override the ticket implementation and then do every fourth frame, send it back that way. But that would only affect our custom animation controller. It wouldn't actually affect the entire application, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So if you wanted something with the entire application, it'd be difficult.
We have some questions.
So do we have any questions?
Yes. So I think we touched it kind of. What's the use of a VSync?
Yep. So VSync, I assume that it stands for video synchronization or video synchronizer. I think the V is for video. But at the end of the day, if you're watching a clock, so animation is all based on the movement of time, and that's like a clock that ticks, 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 ticks. Something needs to provide you with that signal of time moving into the future. And more specifically, it needs to be based on when you can paint the screen. So it's kind of like every time you paint the screen, you get this notification of time that's gone by. And that's what the VSync is about. So the Android platform and the iOS platform actually send a signal saying, I don't know if it's we're ready to render or we just finished rendering, but it's a signal that comes from the platform that's used to essentially represent a clock, which all of your animations require to change over time. Simon, do you want to add anything to that explanation?
I think you had it better than I could explain it.
Okay. That's the first time that's ever happened.
I know how it all works, but succinctly saying it is the problem for me.
So I'm not sure, Matt, if you can remember the code you wrote back then in your live stream. So here's the question about the page view.
Oh, so this is the live stream that we showed earlier, the very first workshop. Right.
Well, there wasn't any dragging in that exercise, so I'm not sure where page view or dragging comes from.
Me neither.
So,
okay.
So I want to adjust.
This might be unrelated.
I want to adjust the on drag and characteristics of page view. I think to adjust this condition, the on drag and characteristics.
I'm not even sure what he's asking for here. However, what I think he wants to do is about, I think it's that, do you think it's that locking? You know, when you drag a page and it wants to like lock to the left side of the,
Sure.
Next. If you want to override that, it looks like the same question from two people. That Gene, what was the next question?
I think it's the second part of the question. I'm not really sure.
You just write override page view.custom for that. Override on page drag end method.
When I page, so like I'm not sure where this is implemented. There's page view, but there's also the page view controller or whatever that controller is. And both of those things have a role to play when it comes to dragging. So I'm not sure where that particular decision is defined. And so unfortunately, I don't know exactly where you'd go to change it.
I have a feeling I know it's the physics. I think it's the physics, this thing called scroll physics that you can pass into a page view or into a list view. And you can actually take a list view and give it page scroll physics and it will snap. So the snapping and the dragging motion, that translation between dragging and where things are moved to happens with the physics. So
yeah, so go check that out. And is physics set on the page view controller, or is it on the page view itself? I think it's on the controller.
It's on the.
Oh, it's on the page view.
I think it's on the page view widget. Yeah.
Okay. Either way, go check out somewhere you can set the physics. So go check out where you can set the physics and see if you can change that to get the drag behavior that you want.
This is a simple one, I think.
I'm sure someone here implemented dark mode, didn't they?
Yeah, I can't take credit for implementing the theme, but the signal from the OS I did. Now this API has actually changed since I worked on it. But last time I touched it, in the material app definition, there's a theme property. There is also I believe, dark theme property. So the operating system, Android, for example, actually says you are in regular mode or you are in dark mode. And then Flutter supports rendering as light or as dark. And actually, all four of those things operate, or both of those dimensions operate independently. You can render dark when the OS is in normal mode, and you can render light when the OS is in dark mode. So these are two different variables. But the first place I would go look is in Material App, look for a property called Dark Theme, and whatever theme you want in dark mode, just set it on that property and it should work automatically.
I believe there's theme mode. I think it's called theme mode, and that lets you force dark mode to use the dark mode theme as you were talking about, or light mode. So if you leave it, I think it's platform specified or something like that, it means you'll choose it based on time of day from the platform hints.
So I have timer in my page. Each time change, it builds the entire page. Although my timer, although my timer is in different stateful class, how can I solve? Okay, do either of you understand specifically what this is getting at?
So I think what he's doing is wherever his timer is, he's doing set state, right? So he's rebuilding all the widgets.
Like a second ticks and then he rebuilds the app.
Yeah.
Or the widget.
So the problem here is making it more specific to the area that it's rebuilding.
Yeah, it's too high in the tree. Your timer is being applied too high in the tree.
You could, I think that for me, you can still have the timer state higher in the tree, but it's what it links to do the rebuild. There are several ways around that. I think that probably the easiest one is you can actually link up a value notify provider if you're using the provider package, or a value notifier, and there's actually a widget called value listenable builder. And basically you can have the bit further down in your tree, which surrounds the bit you want to change, surrounded with a value notify value listenable builder. And you pass down the value notifier. So as soon as that value changes in the value notifier, which means every time the timer changes, you change the value, you'll only rebuild that portion of your UI.
Right. I mean, one way or the other, the point is you need to call set state in a more specific location. Though I do think it's worth asking, if you're animating a little thing down here, why is your timer up here? You might have an answer for that, but answer that
maybe
question
because
first.
it's shared and then a model is perfect for that.
Yeah, it could be.
Then you want to go fetch the model, but still and probably have the timer. And also, again, you don't really probably want your timer going when you've not got something on the screen, and vice versa. So there's little changes around the way you access the data.
This looks like a Simon question to me. So Simon, what are the possible methods for caching lots of images in a grid tile without taking hits in performance?
Caching lots of images in a grid without taking hits to performance. So I think that idea being that when you scroll some images in the screen, it takes a performance hit because you're suddenly loading all these images in. I think that's a common use case. There's actually a method in there's a method in the SDK, and I'm going to dig it out now. I think it's pre-cache image. Yes, pre-cache image. It's a global function, all one word, capital I, pre-cache image, and it allows you to specify an image provider. So if you're getting these images from network, you use a network image class. If you're using it from assets, an asset image class. If you're curious, by the way, what the linking is between the widget, you normally use like an image.network or an image.asset widget, and the provider it uses, if you just control click or command click, whatever it is, go into it, you'll see that the very first line after the constructor ends is the class that it's using as the provider. So a little hint for you. But either way, you would, in your init state, go through an array of all your images that you want to load and run pre-cache image on each one, and it will load up the image cache that's built into Flutter's rendering engine with all the images up front, so that when you comes to scroll them in, they come into the screen. Now, you can intelligently do that, right? So you can say, when I've scrolled one row in or 2 rows in, only get the next 2 rows and pre-cache those. So you can intelligently do this. There is actually it's much easier way of doing this. So this is the finer details. And if you want to do anything really, really high performance, you have to do these kind of things, right? Call these methods. However, list view, page view, all the scroll views have a property called cache extent. Cache extent is how much off screen it's going to load. So let's say you're seeing the first screen and you specify the height of the list view, it will load a height of the list view underneath off screen, so that when you scroll, the widgets are already there, they're already loaded the images. So you can just say, if you wrap your page view or list view or whatever it might be, grid view, in a layout builder, you can specify the extent as being 3 times max height from the parent constraints. And it will load 3 pages worth of content off screen. So when you scroll, they're already there. And the widgets are there, and it's all populated and render objects and everything.
Good answer.
Also make sure that you're using the constructor with the builder and you're not constructing all the widgets at once.
Yeah. I was going to say that's a good call. I didn't even think of that. I just think of doing that straight away. Yeah.
Would it be possible to rotate blocks of 4 pixels within bigger blocks of 8 by 8 pixels in the entire image?
In what we were doing, for sure. Yeah. So you can actually do that with, you could do it with a matrix actually, but basically you're doing a transpose, right? So you're flipping rows for columns, columns for rows, and you can just do that with reading and writing. So you read from a row and you write to a column. So if you're going to do that way, you need 2 buffers. You need your input pixel buffer and your output pixel buffer, because you would overwrite the same pixels you're trying to read from otherwise. But yeah, it's totally possible.
So now I have a few questions for Matt. And
Put me on the
nothing
spot.
too serious.
Do we want to bring some guests in a minute after these?
We could do in a second, yeah.
Okay,
so first of all, are there workshops planned where we can participate in?
I don't think I have any workshops planned yet. So I'm not sure what the makeup of the audience is here, but in case anyone's unaware, I am partnered with Very Good Ventures, and we offer corporate training. So if you're on a team, we will actually train you remotely, and that training does involve workshops over a 3-day period in conjunction with lectures. In terms of what I'm doing on the super declarative education front, right now I'm focused on videos and articles and books. So maybe sometime next year we can look at workshops, but for now, I have a long backlog that's going to take me a while to get through.
Not to mention there's COVID happening right now, so kind of, yeah.
Yeah, well, I discovered that my regular life is called quarantine, so I'm doing all right.
I think we have another one. So what topics do you cover in your first season?
You know, I never even thought to refer to the series as a season, but that sounds like a much better marketing way to do it. I'll be like the Flutter
Season
education
1.
Netflix. So the next topic. So
Netflix might buy it off. You never know.
yeah, if Netflix wants to give me that Game of Thrones money, I'll take it. Or was Game of Thrones HBO? I can't remember. I can never keep those networks
It's
straight.
HBO.
Okay.
Netflix play licensing, right?
That's
so
fine.
They can pay you.
Netflix money is just as welcome here as HBO money. All the money is welcome. So for future topics, I already have a number of widget workshops in the pipeline. I don't want to scoop myself on those, so you should go subscribe to my channel and follow me on Twitter if you want to see when those come out. But I'm aiming for every 2 weeks to have a widget workshop come out or something comparable. I'm also planning to start a podcast here sometime soon, which will be the Super Declarative Show. It will be all things Flutter and app development. And eventually I will get back to Flutter challenges, which will be larger scale Flutter endeavors that probably span multiple videos, 3 to 5 videos each. Those are the things that are in the pipeline, and I will keep you all informed as I'm ready to roll them out.
Woohoo!
I think we have another topic question, but this is more, which systems do you like to cover? So you have a background as a mobile developer. Are you still focusing on mobile, or are you also expanding to desktop?
So I am currently just focused on mobile in the sense that my existing clients are exclusively mobile. It happens that my current web properties were built with the terrible world that is web development. But as soon as things kind of calm down, I'm going to go back and rewrite all of my web properties in Flutter for web. And so I am looking forward to doing that. And I will begin to explore Flutter for desktop because I may create some tools for myself that I can run on this MacBook here. And it's better to do that locally with the desktop configuration than try to stick it in a website somewhere and authenticate and secure it and all that stuff.
I just wanted to just change this up question. There might be approached differently. The question then is also, if you're building an app, which one would you focus on first, right? Which environments would you focus on first? I think it could
that's got to be a business decision. If anytime that you're talking about it doesn't have to be technology related, but if you're releasing a product, where, when, and how you do it, that's got to be a business decision. So iOS, we know that the App Store is where most of the money is. We know Android is where most of the technical freedom is, although they're doing a good job of destroying that positive side of things. The web allows you could conceivably bring up a website on this little device here. So if you don't need the money of the App Store, you don't need the technical freedom of Android, you go to web and you can have a decent mobile web experience as well. But these are things you got to talk with your product team about and your tech team and decide what the best option is, all things considered.
Well, I think if we're going to be talking about multiple platforms, I think we can bring in someone that's done a lot of work with that. I think we've got Rody Davis here.
How's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah,
Welcome,
pretty
claps.
good.
Rody, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Rody Davis, and I've been working with Flutter for since beta 2, actually, so over 3 years, and been really exciting to build multiple apps on both desktop and web.
And I think since we're introducing people, let's introduce Mariano. Should we join us? There we go. The code pen master himself.
There you go. How's everyone doing? Can you hear?
Yeah,
there you
good,
go.
good.
Yes.
We've
For
got
ones
Mr.
who don't know me, my name is Mariano Sorella. I'm from Argentina. I got a few communities in San Francisco and South America, and I clone apps, big apps. So you probably saw a few of those on social media, and that's my thing for the moment.
Mr. Netflix himself right here.
Yes. Spotify. That was a big one. Yeah.
Say that the Dominic did that logo, the logo transition on the animated logo on Netflix.
It's fully done with a custom,
and it's perfect.
Yes. It's a custom painter, so if you check the code, everything that I have is open source, so everyone can check how everything was built. But it's great that it works on the, I would say, worst case scenario, which is scope and kit. This is a debug with a lot of JavaScript on top, and if it works great there, compile works way better.
I've been doing, obviously we've been doing the Hack 20 website with Flutter Web, and it's just been, I was doing some Flutter Web before that one for a client, and then this, and it's just I'm constantly surprised about the performance that I'm getting out of Flutter Web. I remember when I first touched it a while ago, it's terrible. Now I'm looking at it going, oh my God, how good is this? Does Flutter work working on browsers?
Oh, my.
Working out, bros. I can answer that one.
Load the Hack20 site in different browsers and tell me if it works, because I didn't try.
I can give you my experience of trying weird UI things. Is best things works on Chromium, then Chrome, then Firefox, then Opera, then Safari Mac, and then Safari iOS. Sadly, that's the worst one in terms of the things that you can do.
I think
they're really lacking in a lot of features.
I was going to say it's platform limitations more than anything else.
APIs mostly.
Yeah. But you have issues, for example, if you have different kind of blurs and stuff. iOS, Safari iOS doesn't handle really well as well. Some glitches that I have as well, and with a skin enable, just don't. But if you use Chrome and Chrome Android, it's really good.
There are some things that I run into at the moment with Flutter Web, and that is just the sporadic use of repaint boundary to resolve problems. So a good example of that, just in case people run into this, if you, in fact, we'll put a link, because this has been requested, I'll put a link in the gists, to my gists for iframes. So how to put iframes and other HTML widgets easily into your widget tree in Flutter Web. There's a couple of it's not very simple right now, and I've simplified it. But
nice.
Thank you. The interesting point about this, though, is if you ever get a HTML piece of HTML widget, I guess, iframe, for instance, in your Flutter widget tree, whenever it's due to repaint, it can rebuild that widget, rebuild that HTML element, which is when you get flickering. So things like repainting happens, it flickers. So solving that just is wrapping things in repaint boundaries. So normally it's siblings, but it means that you end up not having to repaint the area which the iframe is on, but it's not straightforward at the moment. So a little bit of tweaking for the framework to do there. To hopefully
for those who don't know, every what is called element, it could be a div element, audio element, video element, it doesn't matter, are the representations of the elements for the web. So when you do the repaint boundaries, it happens on a different layer, so it's not affect. The other way of hacking that one is to have a static method with that element, and you can use the HTML widget, if you want to call it, with that element to use it without all the issues of repainting, and it's annoying. But hopefully we'll fix soon. Yeah.
I'm going to bring something up here, just because
I had that.
You were just talking about that. This was actually I was going to show on the stream anyway, but we didn't get time, so I'm going to carry on talking. I'm going to quickly sneak this in. I think some of you have already seen this, but I'm going to show this anyway. For the 40th anniversary of, he says, for the 40th anniversary of Pac-Man, I decided to make Pac-Man work on desktop and in Flutter specifically. So what I've actually done here is today I published a Z80. It's a library on pub.dev called Z80. It's the Z80 CPU. You're welcome to use it in the hackathon, and you can do things like this, which hopefully, if it works, push fingers. One time I want it to work, and it's not going to work.
Yeah. Don't worry. Bill Gates had that issue with Windows 98, right? So everyone can have that issue.
To be enough,
That's so retro. It's like before there was any electricity.
This is pre-displays.
So anyway, this is Pac-Man running basically a handwritten emulator running in Flutter. And it draws all the pixels and it renders it all. And I've got sound working. It works on web to a degree. Needs some work before I release it. So hopefully, if this builds, Gradle, I'm waiting for Gradle, obviously.
Yeah. In the meantime, I think I have a question for Rody.
Okay.
Speaking of geolocation and background services, so what's the best way to get geolocation in your Flutter application?
Web, desktop, or mobile? Because mobile, you have some really nice plugins where you can go around with platform channels. They have an example in the Flutter documentation about using these APIs. If you're on web, you're going to have a tough time because they have that on pretty much lockdown. I don't even think you get access to it even if you're in a service worker because it needs explicit permission.
Yes, you need the user permission. We have that issue with doing the Uber clone that we did. Simon helping with that one. We did kind of like a bridge communication between two files. We have an HTML with all the you can say all the states from the Google Maps. So as soon as the Google Maps load, we can call all methods, and we call them from Dart. And we didn't have any issues. I got the user location. If the user updates and moves around, we can track those movements. And I also can add different markers. And if I want to add, for example, in that case that I add a small car, I can add the markers, update the markers, rotate it if I want it, which is displaying a new image with a different rotation. But I didn't have those limitations, but it was a struggle. It wasn't that easy as a 1, 2, 3. It was it took a moment to figure it out.
Yeah, the package I've also used in the past is called Location, and then there's also different ways to go about it. You can go like directly through platform channels, use native device APIs. You can kind of get even crazier with certain Google packages. But I would say as long as you're not like, if you're just getting like the the latitude and longitude within a certain radius, like you don't have to basically deal with a lot of this like kind of privacy stuff. It's when you like start tracking it like every so often and then over a period of time where Apple really will start to reject your application. So just to be aware of that. I
also think there was a change in Android 10 that by default you do not get the location in the background. So you have to add a foreground service for that.
Yeah, you also have different limitations than now the apps. You can decide that they only get your location if they're using the app. Same thing experienced with the iOS. So if you're not using the app, they cannot track your location. If you allow them, they can do it at any time. In Android, you have a callback that if the user moves a lot, they will send you a callback saying that, okay, this is a new location. But if you want to like pull that location, remember that you cannot do it as often as you can do it in the past with Android. Now you have to wait 15 minutes. And all those different service requests, pull requests, if you want to do it like a Chrome task all the time. Cool. It's a little bit more limited than before, but you can still do those tricks if you really need it.
Awesome.
I have a question for Matt.
There's one question here that I think might be nice to answer, as I think Simon would have a good answer to this. But there's a question that says, how do you make your own custom physics?
Math.
What's the meaning of life? Yeah.
I mean, I'm assuming he means scroll physics.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So extend the scroll physics class, and I think it's you can just extend it as an abstract class, and you get to implement there's a callback method, which just you basically got an input and output. It's pretty straightforward. To be honest, the best thing I could suggest to anyone that wants to play around with that is go look at the current scroll physics implementations. So a quick trick, go to api.flutter.dev, type in scroll physics or the class you're looking at, and it will show you, when you go to the classes page, it will show you all the implementers. That is all the classes that implement that base class. So you'll see it has page scroll physics, clamp scroll physics, bouncing scroll physics, all these different things. And then now you know the class name, you can go look that up in the source code and go, how did they make it bounce, right? And then you can try to figure it out for yourself.
And you can also extend physics, right? You can take physics option A that already exists, and you can kind of extend it or wrap it with your own physics that just adds additional
stuff.
The
bouncing one, right? You can just copy the bouncing one and change the amount it bounces by, so it goes boing and like there you go. That's now your new.
That's exactly what I recently did. I detected that the scrolling in iOS is a bit off compared to native. And I changed the values there and created a pull request.
Nice.
And one detail that I don't know if you guys are that familiar, but in the past, web only have the Android over scroll physics. So now it detects the platform. So if you're using Mac OS, now it defaults the bounce scroll physics. And if you're in Windows and others, have the Android one. And it also affects the way you go back to the previous page. If you do a navigator, it feels like an Android app if you're running on Mac OS.
You can, and just to point out, we actually did this on the Hack 20 website. We just overrid the target platform to always think it was always be Android, always be. No, I think it was always Windows because there's no implementation, so it felt like just a basic website without any bouncing and anything. So yeah.
But if you don't think too much about it, want to do a PWA, it's a good thing that it gives you out of the box. You don't have to think too much. You just release it, use it on Android, use it on iOS, and they will have their own same look and feel as you expect from the platform.
I've got this working. If you guys want to see,
sure,
cool, sure.
So there you go. It's running really badly right now. We're looking at drop frames, but I honestly think it's debug, and then of course we're also screen sharing and streaming and everything else. But yeah, so that is actually I can. There you go. So I can actually, I'm playing here. Let's go kill myself.
For those wondering, these aren't Flutter widgets. This is actually like, emulating the CPU and running the ROM.
Emulating the CPU. And then
you can talk about a little bit about the library that you did about the C80.
Yeah, I wouldn't go too far, but you can find the Z80 package that I've made now up on pub.dev. This is just a port. So this is just, let me just kill this. So this is just a port of, I've got it in the README, a lady called Molly Howell did a version called Z80 JavaScript. So I went ahead and ported that to Dart, and it is absolutely massive. There's no point me even talking about this. Like, no one's going to understand this. It took a better part of about 3 hours, 4 hours to port, I think, just to make all the brackets, the right brackets, and everything else, and then to optimize things just for Dart. And it's cycle complete. And basically, the idea here is really simple to implement. I'll open up the example here. In this case, I've created a fake system here, like a fake computer, and it has a Z80 implement Z80 core, which has these 4 callbacks for reading memory and reading IO, and writing in memory and writing IO. And then in this case, we load up some RAM. In this case, with a few bytes, and then run the CPU cycles, which will basically interpret each one of these as an instruction. And these are the instructions written out in comments above. So this is how old programs used to be written. You used to handwrite them in assembly, basically, and then the assembler would output a load of bytes to a file. That's literally, and it's still literally how, when we do these modern Dart programs, Dart makes it into this intermediate code that makes it into machine code that then, makes it into essentially the mnemonics, and then the mnemonics go into byte code, like the machine code like this. That is literally a bin file that your Flutter app might run, right? But this is Z80, whereas your Flutter app compiles into Intel x86 and 64 and ARM and all those fun things. So this is just simulating this very old CPU that it's not manufactured anymore, because that's what Pac-Man uses. So if I close this, Pac-Man is actually data. So here's the Pac-Man ROMs in all the byte code that make up all the instructions in memory, and then I basically just load these up into a fake array of 64 kilobytes, which is the RAM, and then the CPU interprets that and runs it. And then there's other stuff here that talks about colors, manipulating the pixels, and rendering sound and fun things, which we won't go into. But point is, the output is a game, and what you were seeing on the screen was a bit similar to what we were playing around earlier. It creates a video buffer with a value notifier, and then it decides to, in the background, render the frame, and then this goes off and then decodes the image back to a pixel buffer, and then displays as a raw image on the screen. So very similar to what we were just doing, but it does it on every frame, 60 FPS a second. And it runs I think it's 3, I mean, this just shows it, and that's in debug. It's running a 3 megahertz CPU and decoding all those frames of graphics and everything else. I mean, that's not bad going. That's not bad going in debug, right? So, yeah, there you go. And I thought to give people the right experience, we might need to load it up in a 3D graphic of the original cabinet. So
why not, right?
This is actually Flutter. So why not, right? Why not take it that step further? So let me pause the rotation by commenting that out. There you go. So this is a 3D model, which is in the assets here. It's just like it's called an object file. It's an ASCII format, and I made a quick parser for that, which is here. And in essence, it just gets out all those all the 3D points and the triangles from the original model and maps them to 2D space. So this does a perspective transform. Now I actually did this. It's actually interesting. I did this thing, similar thing to this, way back a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago in Flutter. I can't remember. It was very early on. I was playing around with the canvas stuff. And then recently in the Flutter Clock Challenge, I won't remember his name right now, but he gave me the idea of doing this by seeing his code. He did a full 3D engine like this, but he did it with all sorts of fun things in lighting and other things. And he did it for his Nixie clock. It's Nixie clock. If I remember the link, I'll put in the description for people to go check it out. However, this code is not really based on that, but it gave me the vision to come back to this and try it out. So this gets the vertices, removes the back faces. So if I was to comment this out, we'll just have a quick little bit of fun here. If I comment it out, there you go. So now you can see all the back faces. That's on the other side of the model, which we're getting rid of. And there's a little bit of processing just to sort things into their Z order. So you draw the triangles from back to front. Mapping the texture inverted, because texture coordinates, if people don't know, there's a little bit of information to share. OpenGL or other 3D rendering systems, 0, for applications in the top left. When you have when you're trying to work out your Cartesian coordinates, 0 is always top left. In graphics and 3-dimensional programs, it's the bottom left. So your x, your y, is inverted. So we actually have to invert the axis here by doing that. And then purely this then creates what's called a UI vertices. So it's actually this mapping, this projection, perspective, transform, matrix, transition that converts them into basically takes my rotation matrix, applies it to all the 3D points, and then we then take that and down here we map it to an offset. The simple offset that you would normally use in painting in a custom painter. Basically taking the XY component of each position of each triangle gives us back a vertices, which is actually part of the framework. This is part of Flutter. I'm not making this up. It renders triangles, but they're 2D triangles, not 3D triangles. Yeah. So this renders 2D triangles and texture maps them, and that's what you're seeing here. And then I made a quick and sloppy painter here, which simply this is just literally demonstration. I might release this as a library if I can tidy it up, but basically renders that mesh and then literally just sets up a shader and paints it. There is their draw vertices on canvas. So
that's pretty impressive that this is possible at all with
this is what I'm saying. So I feel like we could, you can take this and there's the glitches that you see here are in the model and some other things I was looking at, so forgive that. But you can also do things, I think I've commented it out here, but
I think we're running out of time here.
Shading.
I want to end here with the last two questions. And first of all, I want to get a bit on the recent mobile app problem. And this is something about the Hey app. So they had a problem with getting or staying in the App Store because of their in-app purchase. Matt, do you have an opinion on that topic?
What is this?
I think this is news to me. Does anyone want to fill me in on what happened?
Yes, I can chime a little bit about that one. So what happened is the Hide app is an email client developed by the guys of Basecamp, if I recall correctly. They wanted to push the app into the App Store, but they have their own system. It's pretty much like Netflix or Spotify, where you have your system, you pay for that membership, and that's it. Apple didn't like that. They want the cut of 30% out of it, which Hey say that we don't want that. They wanted to remove the app from the App Store. So yes, it's a little bit abusive.
It's not new. This has been around a long, long time. For all the time the app stores have been around for, this has always been a problem, right?
Yeah.
Well, the biggest thing is that they got
Even-
really back in though. That's the Apple
Yes.
kind of they got to appeal it and they won.
Yeah,
Oh, really?
One of the
Yeah.
first instance
okay.
of that issue is as soon as PayPal released the mobile client APIs, everyone want to, of course, do the purchases with PayPal or similar, and
Right.
Apple didn't like it, and Google didn't like it, so your apps could be either banned or removed directly from the suspended, because they wanted the 30% cut out of your whatever
So-
income you have.
First time I remember hearing about this problem was 2011.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's a
yeah,
common
20
problem, but
yeah.
now it hit a major app, and yeah.
This
well,
one was a
I'm
big
kind of-
one. Used it as
The problem I see with this, right, is it's like I saw this was before this is before. So I'm just going to so there's an ebook reader called Ebook. I think it's called Ebook. Anyway, and they wanted to release an app in the App Store, but they have their own subscription process, right? So they wanted to link to the website and say you can subscribe on our website to our process. You can't do that. No, you'll get to terms. You can't do that. Even then they mentioned we can't tell you where to subscribe from, but you can find out where to subscribe from, right? On our
You can't link to it because you will get
but even mentioning that, Apple told them they can't do that either.
Yeah.
And they literally it's went through this entire process, and it turned out a week later. I think it was a week or very soon after, Apple released their ebook stuff in App Store. So they were on purpose denying, this person
competition.
because of competition, right? Which I think it totally in their terms of service, they're allowed to do that, but that's the type of thing you have to deal with, right? You're using their platform, you're using their stuff.
If they won on appeal, then what is the current law of the land? Are you allowed to take subscription money without using the App Store?
No, the current stance right now of Apple is that you can appeal any App Store rejection. So it's up to a case-by-case basis. If you can provide sufficient reasoning, then you can win your case. But the thing is, it's you have to be a big app to kind of like indie developers are not be able to do it. I mean, I've won a couple App Store rejections.
All apps are equal,
like
but
that.
some apps are more equal than others. Is what you're telling me.
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly. Yes, they have one specific point in the privacy policy which I think it hurts the smaller creators and developers. That it says if you go to the media, that's not going to help repeal. So
it works. Though.
It's a little bit intimidated. It works for them because they're base cap, and they're like big accounts behind that one. But what about me? What about everyone here? I don't think they have that chance.
The same thing happens with the Play Store. I'm not going to we're talking about Apple here, but the Play Store, I've seen so many things like that. The app gets automatically picked up as being like some spam thing or something like that. It gets pulled, they get blacklisted, then they're trying to get hold of the Play Store team. They can't get hold of them because Google's a big company. And there's no real support channels, and it's very difficult. So they end up making a big fuss on social media, and suddenly, someone comes in and says, "No, we'll sort it out for you," and they email back and forth, and finally gets sorted out, right? But I feel like this is the problem that we got when we have these huge domains as the App Store are. It's so difficult to get that sort of customer service and manage it, and it's a big problem. It's not something that. This isn't not easy. It's a known problem, right? Like all the big companies have this problem where they've got so many customers. How do you deal with them all?
It's the same thing happens with YouTube. It's like I know that a lot of people want their review case by case, but if you have so many, like thousands of videos uploaded every single minute, and the same with apps, so millions, you need to automate a lot of stuff. If not, you will hire like half of the population just to review apps and videos. I
think the key here is also to say we're not agreeing with that, right? We're not saying that.
No, exactly. Yeah. We understand.
There's a reason for it. That's what we're saying.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Totally. We know why it's happening, but it's not that. Oh, sure. Why not?
So in the end, isn't it better to release your app as a Flutter web application and not have to care about the app stores?
I believe
depending on what you're doing,
but
it depends on what you're doing, and I think
if you really need some, imagine that you need an Android getting audio in low latency, native.
I was gonna say another good example of that, right, is what we've just been speaking about. Is like the features of the different browsers again. Like they still haven't got all the HTML5 features and like all these different things that you want to have across the browsers, and that's one of the things that you kind of get. You have a foundation of saying, we have something that is solid that we can work on. We're talking about like
Yeah.
mobile apps or desktop apps. You know that's kind of fixed, whereas the browsers all change.
Speaking of web, the final question for today. So I think this is something many attendees of the hackathon will actually run into, that how can I show a tweet in my Flutter web application?
It's really simple. It's not an issue. You
I
can
actually
even,
have a packet for it,
here's a really good one for a lot of people. How can we display AdSense and stuff on Flutter web using iframe, using a JavaScript element? That's it. You fix it. In my case, for example, I'm using an iframe to display my product hound for one of my websites, and I use that, and it works perfectly. So if it's not ready for Flutter build on Dart, just use all the JavaScript stuff. You can still call JavaScript from Flutter web without any hiccups, without any issues, and you can display it as a widget, or just display it as a complete HTML element, and that's it.
There's a little bit of finessing though in terms of in HTML. In Flutter Web, getting to use a HTML element properly. I have a gist for that, and I'm going to post that into the chat, and we can you can also put that in the description. So.
Yeah, we will put that in the description as well. So thank you, everyone. This were 2 hours of a lot of fun and a lot of knowledge sharing. Thank you for attending, Rody. Thank you for attending, Mariano, and of course, thank you for attending, Matt.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks for having me. It's a good time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
See you later.
Yes. Thanks, everyone.